welfare through art, culture, literature, movies, talks, and panel discussions. Our expectation is that people who have attended our events conducted in Bangalore, where policies for remote and wilderness regions are developed on their own or with their proximity to the people from policy making, help in developing appropriate conservation and welfare measures for wildlife, including elephants. So this is what Friends of Elephants is all about.
I think we lost Aksha. We'll just give her a second to connect back.
Hello, I think my internet got disconnected in between. Can you hear me now? Naveen, am I audible?
Yes, Aksha, you're audible. I'll just make you the co-host.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
I think I was introducing Dr. Bhivash while the internet got disconnected.
Yeah, you can just start from the beginning. Yeah.
Yes. I'll continue with the introduction to Dr. Bhivash. I'm sorry, Dr. Bhivash. I'll start once again. So, 1 second. Yeah, so Dr. Bhivash is a wildlife biologist, and after his completion of Masters in Wildlife Science at WII, he embarked on a survey of sea turtle nesting beaches in 1993. And while his survey of 6 months, it led to a discovery of a new mass nesting site of olive ridley sea turtles at the mouth of Rishikulya River along the southern Orissa coast. Dr. Bhivash Pandav joined WII as a faculty in November 1999. From 2007 to 2010, he went on a secondment to WWF International and coordinated WWF's Tiger Program in 11 tiger range countries. And this gave him a fantastic opportunity to walk in most tiger habitats across Asia and exposed him to a wide variety of conservation issues. Following his return in 2011, Dr. Pandav was actively involved in teaching postgraduate students, training forest officers on wildlife management, and conducting his own research in the foothill forests of Himalaya, Gangetic floodplains, and in the highlands of central India. Dr. Pandav is currently on a second amendment from WII to BNHS and has joined BNHS on January 1st, 2021 as its director. He appeals to the citizens of India to become BNHS members and be part of conservation movement of this great country. So Dr. Bibhash, without further ado, I request you to kindly take over with your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. So just before beginning the presentation, good evening to everyone. I'm not in a great mood today, actually. It's primarily, I'll just take 2 minutes explaining why I am not in a great mood. Primarily, I had a busy day in office today, very busy day. And you know, Bombay traffic, coming back home, you are dead tired, you are completely drained. And Dr. Rahmani, who will be there, who will pitch in, Dr. Rahmani is a chronic bachelor. And I am a forced bachelor in Bombay. I live alone. So I'm too worried about what I'm going to cook for my dinner. So I just came quickly, took out some puttu powder and mixed it. So it's getting ready now in the kitchen. So, and yesterday I had cooked some fish curry. So I thought I'll utilize that puttu and fish curry I'll have. But my mind is totally preoccupied in what's going to be there for dinner because I'm very hungry. Okay. So pardon me if I am not in best of my spirit during today's this evening or this half an hour lecture that or talk that I'll be giving. So this talk is primarily the center stage of today's discussion is primarily the river Ganga. And there are two large mammals along Ganga that we'll be discussing. So it is structured in two different presentations. I actually did not get time to piece them together. So, but I will talk about elephants first, very briefly, hardly 7-8 minutes. And then we'll come to the other character of this talk, that is the swamp deer. And the common factor between both elephant and swamp deer are river Ganga. So I'll begin with the elephants. Very briefly, I will tell you. Open system preference. So I need to share my screen. And nowadays, with all these things, Zoom, Google Meet, Video Connect, WebEx, I am thoroughly confused. So how do I share my screen?
You just have to click on the share screen and just select your presentation. That's
it. Can you see the screen now?
Not yet.
You can't see now?
No.
Just a minute. Just give me a moment. I don't see the share screen now.
Bottom of the screen at the center, you have a green icon. Share screen.
I'm not something experienced. The power of pro, it's coming. There is share screen is that. Just a minute. It should come now. Yeah. Share screen. When I come to share screen, it shows me share and allow Zoom to, then it tells me open system preference.
Yeah, you just have to keep a presentation open and just select it.
So I go to system preference. Is it visible now?
Not yet.
No?
No.
It's saying privacy, then Zoom.
As soon as you click a share screen, a window opens, right?
Yeah, as soon as I click share screen.
Yeah, a window opens. So in that, you should be able to see your presentation if it's open.
Okay, desktop. No, it's, see, I use an Apple.
Okay.
Open system preference. No, it's taking me to system preference. And when I go to screen, it's not leading me anywhere.
You've already opened your presentation, or
my presentation is open.
Okay, so when you select share screen, you're not able to select your presentation.
It's just not coming. It's coming. I mean, normally it should come desktop, and desktop the presentation is there.
Yeah.
It's not. It's coming Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, Box, Microsoft SharePoint.
Okay. Yeah, you can just mail it to me. I can just run it for you if that's fine.
Sir, just check, like in the share screen, there'll be a basic, advanced, and file.
Just a minute.
Just check if your files is selected.
Share screen.
Yeah, on top, you will see 3 options: basic, advanced, and files.
It's called advanced sharing option. One participant can share at a time, multiple participants can share simultaneously. Then it's saying advanced sharing options. Okay.
Okay. Does it say basic anywhere? Basic,
no, it's
advanced,
saying
and files.
Who can share? Only host or all participants?
Okay, then.
Okay. No, it's basic, advanced, and file.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true. Select basic. Select basic.
Okay, select basic. Then
can you see the desktop now?
I can see desktop 1, but it's not coming. It's coming with an exclamatory mark. Okay. It's asking me allow Zoom to share your screen, open system preference, security, privacy, and grant access. Open system preference, privacy. Okay. When I click on Zoom.
Okay, Dr. Panam, you can send it, mail it to me. I'll open it for you.
Okay. I am sorry for this confusion. I have not been using Zoom for quite some time.
No problem. No
problem at all.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sending you these 2 presentations.
All right, sure.
To Naveen. Shall I mail it to you?
You can mail it to me.
Okay. Just bear with me for a minute. So I've sent you the first presentation. It is slightly 30 MB.
If it's 30 MB, I'm not sure if it can reach by mail. I'll just check.
It should come. I mean, it should come by Google Drive.
Sir, can you give me a like accept the request to open the file? I'll open it. I've sent you a mail.
Okay, just a minute.
Asking for access to the file.
Yeah. Requesting access. So what should I do? Share. Share a presentation. Yeah, I have given you.
Is this visible?
Says has started sharing the screen. I think it will be visible. It's not yet visible.
Is it visible now?
No, not yet.
Okay. 1 second.
Could you download the presentation?
I'll just download it. I was trying to open it without downloading, but yeah, I'll just open it. Is it visible now?
No.
Not yet.
Is it visible?
No, Aksha. Even I'm trying to download it. Let's see if I'm able to download. I can just share it, but it's not visible yet.
No. See now? No.
No.
Okay.
Now I have started sharing.
I think Aksha should stop sharing, I think, for Dr. Bhivash to start.
Screen?
Yeah.
Yes. Can see it.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. I stopped it. I can see the screen.
Yeah, we can see. We can see.
You can see 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
10 minutes is about elephants. You on a map, but most of you have heard about Haridwar. So, you know, the best slogan about Haridwar, I was driving from just behind a bus. It was written, means if you drive slowly, we will keep meeting again and again. If you are in a hurry, then we'll meet once and for all in Haridwar. So that's what it summarizes Haridwar. Besides being a very, very religious place, Haridwar, whenever people die in North India, especially in North India, the last rites are normally performed on the bank of Ganga in Haridwar. And a lot of other activities also happens right besides Haridwar. Right besides Haridwar, on both sides of Haridwar, on the bank of Ganga, we have a lovely protected area called Rajaji Tiger Reserve, which is contiguous with Corbett Tiger Reserve through the Lansdowne Forest Division, and houses something around 350 elephants. It has got around 40 tigers, 40 to 45 tigers, around 300 to 350 elephants. And a lot of these elephants, actually, especially the bulls, I have never come across females with calves or groups crossing Ganga, but bulls regularly cross Ganga. And we have very fondly named them as gangs of Ganga. So there are up to 18 bulls I have seen them, forming all male groups, crossing Ganga and going. So this is Haridwar will be somewhere here up, and Ganga flows downstream. So today, whatever we'll be discussing is about this area where a lot of elephants are using this area, and the swamp deer habitat, which is between these two small rivers called Pili and Ravasan River. Between these, we have a very beautiful conservation reserve called Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve. Abbreviation will be JJCR. I'll be writing it in my screen, or it will appear on my screen. So the Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve is located here, and the elephant crossing takes place here. The Rajaji Tiger Reserve, this is the green patch that you see here, is the Rajaji Tiger Reserve, which is located both on the east bank of Ganga as well as on the west bank of Ganga. So all these individuals, you know, elephants, you can identify them individually based on morphological features, both males and females. Males are much easier to identify because of the presence of tusk and large body size, and there are various parameters. Say like these, we use the pattern of the ear, we use the pattern of the tusk, tusk length, angle of the tusk. Then we also look at the tail length, and the brush pattern on the tail. So these are some of the parameters that we use to identify the bulls. So with this, actually, we have identified nearly 19 bulls actually crossing. So this is just a graphic representation of how these bulls use. These are the individual animals that are distributed in this area. And by evening, all of them assemble on the bank of Ganga. There is a staging ground. And then entire night, they spend in the crop fields on the east bank of Ganga. And daytime, they come back to the islands, cross the islands, and come and spend time in the forested refuge inside the forest. So this is how these bulls use this area. You can see them daytime, they are very relaxed. Many of them will be sleeping. Many of them will be casually feeding. They will be taking shelter under the tree cover. So wherever small patches of forest and undisturbed areas are there, all these bulls use this area and this. And by evening, as I told you, they all gather together. There are few staging grounds. In fact, we have identified 3 or 4 staging grounds on the east bank of Ganga. So they all gather together, and then they form the group and start crossing the river Ganga. And I have seen elephants, they're extremely good swimmer. Even when Ganga is in full spade during the month of August and September, the bulls cross without any problem. And very peculiar pattern we have observed. Not peculiar pattern, it's a usual pattern. The younger bulls will be in the front and the older bull will always lead the group from behind. And the older bull actually teaches these younger bulls, pushes them and takes them, navigates them through the channels of Ganga, and they easily negotiate the current. Most of them, I have seen them flowing downstream, but against the current. They will be swimming against the current, cross the river, and then go to the other side. Entire night is spent in agriculture field, crop raiding, mostly sugarcane, paddy, and wheat. These are the three crops that are grown there in that area. And this area I was telling you is the Rajaji Tiger Reserve. Rajaji Tiger Reserve, before Uttarakhand was bifurcated from Uttar Pradesh in 2000, a lot of human habitations were there inside the park. These were nomadic pastoral communities who were living inside the park, and they were putting tremendous pressure on the forest. So in year 2000, after the bifurcation of the state, in 2003, Uttarakhand government actually embarked on a very systematic voluntary relocation program in which all the human settlements inside the park were settled outside the park, somewhere in a place very close to the swamp deer habitat, somewhere here called Gendikhata. So here in Gendikhata, these people were brought in and resettled, and the habitat recovered completely. So the crop raiding pattern and all that we were seeing in the past when the forest was degraded, that was contained to a large extent because the forest witnessed a tremendous recovery over the years. So there is excellent grassland available inside the forest now, excellent foraging habitats available for elephants. And as a result, the crop raiding by females and the groups has drastically reduced. Only the bulls form this all-male group and come outside the forest. So that's the background of the elephant, the Gujar who were living inside the forest and who were relocated. And then the forest witnessed a tremendous sign of recovery over last 15 years. So 2003-04, the systematic relocation program was carried out. And that was the time when I was with the Wildlife Institute of India, we were asked to come and monitor the recovery of the habitat. So we embarked on a systematic and scientific monitoring program. In 2003-04, we started, and I continued till 2020, till I was there. So that's a subject of altogether different thing. Primarily, we recovered tiger, and we recorded how human-wildlife conflict has reduced with the improvement of habitat in this area. So when all these things were going on in this Rajaji Tiger Reserve, voluntary relocation of human habitations, recovery of habitat, recovery of tiger, recovery of prey species, very good elephant population growth in these areas. In this place, just downstream, 20 kilometers from Rajaji Tiger Reserve, here, there was another amazing animal was holding on to its ground. And that's the swamp deer, in which I will be giving the second part of this presentation. So the swamp deer. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay. So, so the elephant distribution along Ganga stops little bit of, around 25-30 kilometers downstream of Haridwar. And where the elephant distribution stops, the swamp deer distribution starts. Okay. So giving you a background on swamp deer, we have like 3 subspecies of swamp deer. The one is found in central India, the only population of hard ground Barasinga that is found in Kanha Tiger Reserve. Of course, we have the Madhya Pradesh Forest Department has translocated a part of the Kanha population and has established a small population in Satpura Tiger Reserve in the Bori Wildlife Sanctuary. Other than that, there are no hard ground Barasinga left in the world at the moment. The only wild population is in the Kanha Tiger Reserve. And then when we come to the northern swamp deer is found in the upper Gangetic Plains, which is the focus of today's discussion. It is also found in the plains of Sarada River and adjoining Tarai habitat. And then the third subspecies of the swamp deer is found in Assam, primarily in the floodplains of Brahmaputra, mostly in Kaziranga Tiger Reserve, and a small population in Manas Tiger Reserve. Other than Kaziranga and Manas, we do not have big or viable populations in of the eastern swamp deer, this area. And swamp deer is an endemic deer species to India and Nepal. It's primarily in the Tarai sub-Himalayan foothill forest or in the grassland. It's an obligate grassland species. You do not find swamp deer inside the forest. If you want to look for swamp deer, you have to go to the Tarai grasslands. Typical swampy grassland habitat at the place where swamp deer is found. Unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, IUCN has categorized this species as vulnerable. I would say this species deserves to be elevated to the status of endangered, simply because the habitat where this species is surviving or is managing to survive at this as of today is rapidly disappearing. I would say this simple reason of loss of habitat or the sensitivity of the habitat in which swamp deer is residing at this moment. By end of this presentation, it will become very clear. This species needs to be elevated, and there is an urgent need to deliberate on the status of this species and elevate it from vulnerable to endangered. In the Wildlife Protection Act, it is listed in the Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act. So it is accorded the highest level of protection. Extremely patchy distribution, as I told, grasslands, though they were common once upon a time, they have become extremely rare at this point of time, primarily because reclamation for agriculture. Because grassland ecosystems are the easiest ones to be converted into agriculture fields, and that too in the Tarai sugarcane fields. Because of this rapid conversion, the grassland distribution has become extremely patchy, and so as the distribution of swamp deer. Habitat loss and poaching has been the major reason behind decline of this species. Although people say that swamp deer meat is not as good as other wild cervids, but still we have, during the course of my work on this species, I have come across plenty of evidences of hunting of swamp deer or poaching of swamp deer. So people do kill swamp deer and eat them in many parts of their distribution range. And of course, as I told, loss of habitat is the major reason behind decline of this species. So the two area I was telling about, the elephant habitat, this is the Rajaji Tiger Reserve that you see, and this big reservoir that you see, this is Corbett Tiger Reserve. In between is the Lansdowne Forest Division, which connects both Corbett Tiger Reserve with Rajaji Tiger Reserve. The river Ganga flows in the middle of Rajaji Tiger Reserve. This is where I was telling the elephant distribution comes somewhere till here in river Ganga, and where the elephant distribution stops, the swamp deer distribution starts. This is the Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve, or JJCR, which is located very close to Uttarakhand and UP border, right on the border. And then immediately after the border, we have Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, which is fairly a very large area and along the Ganga, but the wildlife sanctuary does include a lot of agriculture landscapes, and a lot of big towns are also part of this wildlife sanctuary. And there is a talk going on, or there is a directive now to rationalize the boundary of this wildlife sanctuary. And that is how we entered the scene. Actually, we tried to look at the flagship species of Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, that is the swamp deer. We tried to look at the distribution of swamp deer, and we suggested UP Forest Department what are the critical habitat that need to be included, rather than having large stretches of agriculture fields and big towns inside a wildlife sanctuary. So that's the background of this study. So there are two protected areas, the Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary and the Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve, where I will be talking about this northern swamp deer. So this is where is Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve. It is located on the bank of river Ganga and another river called Rawasan River. Okay. So although it is called jheel, you don't find water body. It's a swampy grassland habitat. Once upon a time, it was a saucer-shaped, big, huge chunk of grassland. But over the years, people have come and settled down. Almost half of this saucer-shaped grassland is gone. And this is the remaining area where we have roughly around 300 swamp deer. Maximum number of swamp deer I have counted, it was in 2013. Before that big Uttarakhand flood happened, I have counted around 315 swamp deer in that area. But that flood, lot of swamp deer got washed away. The population suffered a decline. But we normally count around 120 to 140 swamp deer in this area. And the though in summer we get large congregation of swamp deer in Jhilmil Jheel. We have roughly around 140 maximum. As I told, I have seen around 315 swamp deer in this area. But swamp deer do not stay in this place all through the year. And come monsoon, slowly swamp deer disappear and we get to see only 15-20 swamp deer in this area. Okay, so then we became very curious, where are the swamp deer going? So then we started planning, designing a proper research proposal, and with the help of both permission from Uttar Pradesh Forest Department and funding support from Uttarakhand Forest Department, we did radio collar few individuals, and then we started a genetic study between the swamp deer populations of Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary and Jhilmil Jheel Conservation Reserve. As I told you, reports of swamp deer presence in Jhilmil Jheel came into picture in 2006. This was the Mr. Chandola, who was the former Chief Wildlife Warden of Uttarakhand. He actually took a lot of interest and highlighted the presence of swamp deer. And from Aligarh Muslim University, Jamal Ahmad Khan and Hafibullah Khan, they carried out a survey and they had recorded swamp deer presence in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary in 1999. So the only thing that was known before we started our work, that swamp deer are present in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary and they are present in Jhilmil Jheel Conservation Reserve. And we had no idea about the dynamics of the swamp deer population that is going on in this area. So with the permission from Uttar Pradesh Forest Department and funding from Uttarakhand Forest Department, we initiated this program on swamp deer and we started surveying all along the river Ganga, starting from Jhilmil Jheel to the end of Hastinapur boundary. The yellow lines that you see, these are actually the GPS tracks that we have virtually walked and surveyed. And we were very specific while walking. We tried to identify all the grassland patches from the satellite imageries, going into those grassland patches and crisscrossing those grassland patches and adjoining crop fields. And based on structured interview of the local farmers, we were surveying this area and covered this area, tried to find out swamp deer presence, and we nearly walked 4,234 kilometers in recording swamp deer presence in this area. And while recording swamp deer presence, we did rely on the direct sighting of this animal, presence of antlers, presence of hoof marks, and presence of pellets. The other pellet that you normally tend to confuse with swamp deer are sambar and nilgai to some extent. But then nilgai have this typical habit of defecating in dung pile and much larger pellet, cylindrical and larger pellet. And sambar invariably doesn't inhabit these areas. Sambar is primarily an animal of hilly area. They are more common towards the Shivalik, more common in Rajaji, Tiger Reserve, and in Forest of Haridwar Forest Division than in the bank of Ganga. So invariably most of the pellets that we were coming across were swamp deer. But then to be very sure that these are swamp deer pellets, we did genetic analysis to confirm that we are recording clear-cut swamp deer evidences along the river Ganga. So based on our study, based on the track log that you saw, the 4,234 kilometers that we walked on the bank of Ganga and its tributaries, we located swamp deer presence in these green dots that you see primarily all along Ganga. In patches, we recorded swamp deer presence, Ganga and its tributaries. Okay. And then when we looked at the genetic exchange between these populations, we found that this population is mixed. The Jhilmil Jheel Conservation Reserve population is reflected in other area. You can see these blue dots. These are represented in Jhilmil Jhil. And the yellow dots which are represented in Hastinapur, they were also found in Jhilmil Jhil. So this distance of roughly around 80 kilometers from the genetic data, we could clearly prove there is considerable exchange of swamp deer going on, and these are not isolated populations. So the swamp deers located along Ganga are actually using this river course and the grassland patches along the river and moving over a distance of more than 80 kilometers. And then subsequently, in subsequent years, we have done surveys up to Kanpur, and we have found similar kind of swamp deer movement, although the population is much lower south of Bijnor. Okay, but there is near Hapud and other areas, still swamp deer presence is there on the bank of Ganga. So this radio collaring, I mean, this genetic data that exchange of populations or exchange of individuals between Jhilmil Jhil and Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, we wanted to prove it with radio collaring because we had permission, we had equipment. So we embarked on capturing some of the swamp deers and collaring them. So swamp deer capture, it took us a lot of time. It is not like you go in a gypsy, stalk them and then dart them. We tried that. We tried to go with buffaloes and tried to dart them. We tried to put hide and salt licks, tried to dart them, and we failed all these things. They are extremely, agile animals and very wary of human presence. So after doing several hit and trial method, we finally resorted to the drive and drive net method. So it's basically the Jhilmil Jhil, the swamp deer during the daytime, they come out and rest in the open. So when they come out, so we put a net, drive net of roughly around 600 to 700 meter length. And then we try to put the net, and on both sides of the net, we hide ourselves. And then a team of people slowly go. And we also, because it was a flat area, we had 4 people on motorbikes primarily, not to allow swamp deer to move away. And then we slowly close in into this area. So close in, drive them. And although there will be 40, 50 or maybe 100 individuals, the beauty of the drive net or beauty of this animal is when you chase them, they move in the form of a V, just like migratory birds fly in the form of a V. And the first animal is the one that is going to hit the drive net. The moment the first animal hits the drive net, the entire net falls down and other animals jump and cross. So we never faced, with all our attempts, we never faced the problem of capturing 3, 4, 5 animals simultaneously. So that's why it's a pretty safe method. The problem with capturing large number of animals in a net simultaneously will yield into capture myopathy. If you do not have enough veterinarians, around 8 or 10 veterinarians in your team who are going and attending all the 4 or 5 captured individuals, then the moment you delay it, the animal suffer from capture myopathy and may result in its mortality. But what we found, this drive net method is very safe and successfully captured swamp deer and immobilized them and fixed radio collar. You can see this is my colleague Dr. Nigam, Parag Nigam from Wildlife Institute, myself and my field assistant, and he is our main person, Vinod Thakur, who was our lab technician. He's retired now. He is the person actually who came and told us, sir, let us try this drive net method rather than attempting to capture swamp deer through other methods. So this is how we successfully radio collared and followed swamp deers. And the first female that we radio collared in Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve, it actually moved 18 kilometers downstream. The third day after being radio collared, the animal moved 18 kilometers downstream, and the pink patches that you see are the grassland patches. And if you look at their home range, they were very small home range. Okay. And their primary movement is, other than walking through these areas, 90% of their locations were confined to the grassland patches. So that's why we did not calculate the home range, the entire area as their home range. We calculated the intensive use areas. So intensive use areas varied from 0.5 square kilometer to 8 square kilometer area. And the second individual that we radio colored is actually moved from Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve to Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary. The northern part of Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, it moved. Okay. So we could not radio color more individuals, but based on this radio tracking, we are tracking them on the ground as well as through satellite. So when we moved into this area, we saw along with these two radio colored individuals, there were a lot of other animals in that area. So we started putting, camera traps. I'll come to it. But what we clearly found out that 80% of the locations of the radio colored individuals were coming only from the grassland patches. And remaining 20% of the locations were coming from other habitats when the animals were moving. They were moving through water body, they were moving through croplands. Although the area was covered with extensive croplands, they were not spending much time in the croplands. They were just passing through these croplands. They were spending all their time in the grasslands. Okay. So looking at their movement pattern, so we put camera traps and we found out the presence of males. Although we had collared only females, we found the presence of males. Not only presence of males, the males were also rutting in these areas near Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, wherever we have camera trap. We also came across other animals like fishing cat and hog deer, but swamp deers were moving. So we got a very clear idea from our genetic study that these animals are moving between these two protected area, and radio colored individuals and camera trap images gave a very clear indication supporting this. Now coming to 80% of the time I told they are spending in the grassland habitat. Okay, so this is just one grassland habitat. I will show you. This is the grassland area that was available in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, one major area where swamp deer congregation takes place in 2005. Okay, this is how the same area looked like in 2010. So when we did a time series analysis, there was much more expansion of grassland habitat. 2015, lot more areas were under grassland cover, and we recorded swamp deer presence in all these places. These dots that you see are all swamp deer locations. But over the years, slowly, there are a lot of agriculture expansion took place. Besides agriculture expansion, remember I told you voluntary relocation of human settlements took place from Rajaji. So people were brought in and resettled, and these were all nomadic pastoral communities. They had large number of buffaloes. So we gave them agriculture land. We gave people agriculture land to come and settle down, and they took up agriculture in a very nice manner. But we did not address the issue of livestock that they were having. So large number of livestock were actually shifted to adjoining forest divisions or to these fairly unprotected grassland patches in River Ganga. So all these people, Gujar buffaloes, started coming and grazing in these areas and clearly affected the swamp deer habitat that were there, or swamp deers were present in those areas, and these areas were lost either to buffalo grazing or to agriculture. And 2019, just a year back, we lost almost 50% of the grassland in that major swamp deer habitat in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary. This is in the middle of Ganga. This is Ganga, River Ganga, and this is Solani River. Okay, tributary of River Ganga, Ban Ganga and Solani. So this is near the Bijnor barrage, huge patch of nearly 50 square kilometer area. Swamp deer, prime swamp deer habitat, we lost more than 50% of this habitat to this. So on one hand, we gained enormously by translocating or by voluntarily relocating the human settlements from the protected area, from the tiger and elephant habitat. We restored that elephant habitat beautifully, and we, to a large extent, we managed to successfully to get a hold over the human elephant conflict by improving the forest in that area. But we did not look at, we just ignored or we stopped or we forgot to monitor what is happening to the, or how the livestock of these relocated communities are impacting the adjoining natural habitats. And this is a classic example where buffaloes came and overgrazed most of this grassland habitat. Of course, 2019 onwards, there was a very kind-hearted civil servant who was posted in this area, and during his tenure, lot of interventions happened in this area, and buffalo grazing, the Gujar buffaloes that were coming and grazing in this area was controlled to a large extent, and swamp deer are freely roaming in this area. So my thing is, if we do not monitor one area very clearly, and if we do not look at the critically endangered species like swamp deer, which habitat is disappearing rapidly. So this is how the Jhilmil Jhil Conservation Reserve, the swamp deers are actually moving along Ganga, using these patches of grasslands and coming to Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, the major habitat of, or the major grassland patch in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary. So what our recommendation was, instead of protecting unnecessarily, expanding the span of protected area into agriculture habitat, human habitations, cities, townships, we need to focus our attention on the small remnant patches of grasslands along River Ganga, where actually the animal presence is there in this wildlife sanctuary. Okay, so based on this, we have recommended that Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, both the forest department, need to consider this species swamp deer and coordinate their protection activities by protecting these remnant grassland patches, because these animals 3, 4, 5 months in a year they are staying inside the conservation reserve. After that, they are moving and spending their time in other parts of on the bank of River Ganga as well as in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary. So this has to be considered in toto, and accordingly protection strategies should be developed. So we have right now, we have a proper map of grassland habitats which is available in this area. And we also figured out use of drone is one of the best way to find out or assess the population of swamp deer. Unlike other animals, swamp deers are not shy of drones. They are in fact very curious. You fly a drone above them, they will be very curiously looking up and trying to figure out what's happening. And by flying drones, actually we could get a proper estimate of swamp deer, and the inaccessible grassland or swampy patches also, we could figure out presence of swamp deer in these areas. Okay, so you can see swamp deer here, you can see swamp deer in these places. So where you cannot cover by boat or by foot, we could use drones and figure out swamp deer presence in these areas. In fact, you can look at the status of grasslands, see how human habitation and agriculture expansion has happened, and small remnant patches of grasslands are there close to human habitation. These animals are still struggling to survive. So that's how I say, what based on our findings in that area, when we analyzed over last 30-40 years the satellite imagery, what we figured out is 57% of grassland habitat is lost in this area. And I am sure during the subsequent discussion, Dr. Ramani will agree with me, and we would like to deliberate on this. We are rapidly losing these grassland habitats. So swamp deer is just one species. There are many other species which are found in these grassland habitats. Okay, if we actively protect this grassland habitat, I won't be surprised to see Bengal florican in these areas. I won't be surprised to see hispid hare in these areas. I won't be surprised to see a lot of hog deers in these areas. Okay, so grassland habitats are rapidly disappearing in this area. Despite all these problems, disappearance of grassland habitat, genetic connectivity is still maintained between these swamp deers that are distributed in patches along the northern Gangetic plains. So both genetic data and radio collared data that supported this exercise. And it was, believe me, it was not easy to track the animals physically. Although we had satellite transmitters, we actually wanted to get into this habitat. Sometimes waist deep water, you have to go and track these animals. The only fare in this area was python. There are no crocodiles in these areas, or there are very few presence of mugger in this area, but a lot of good abundance of python in this area. Although python has never done anything to us or to our tracking team, but that fear always was there at being attacked by python. But it was an absolute pleasure working or wading through the water in the middle of Ganga or along Ganga and monitoring both elephants and swamp deers. I would now like to open the forum for discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Panav. That was very interesting, very insightful. And it kind of really changed our perspective towards what conservation is. It was a very interesting study. Thank you. While we move on to the next part of this event. So the next part of the event is a conversation between Dr. Rahmani and Dr. Bibhash Panda on the topic, can elephant conservation interfere with swarm deer survival and conservation? So a brief introduction to Dr. Rahmani. Dr. Rahmani was the director of Bombay Natural History Society, BNHS, for 18 years from 1997 to 2015 till his retirement. Before that, he was chairman, Department of Wildlife Sciences for 6 years. He was senior scientific advisor to BNHS from August 2015 to 2017. He was in various MOEF committees for 18 years till he retired. Dr. Rahmani has published 22 books, nearly 150 peer-reviewed scientific papers, 60 book reviews, nearly 65 editorials, and more than 300 popular articles on nature conservation. Dr. Rahmani's main interest is in grassland and wetland birds, and to highlight the plight of lesser-known species and habitats. He has executed nearly 35 major and numerous minor projects of BNHS in a career spanning for over 40 years. He has also guided 11 students for PhD. He has been awarded Lifetime Achievement Award by Vasundhara Pune and Member of Honor by BirdLife International of UK. His hobbies are reading, writing, teaching, and traveling. His other interests are women empowerment and freedom and girl-child education. With this wonderful introduction, I request Dr. Rahmani and Dr. Pandav to please take the conversation forward. Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Dr. Rahmani, we are not able to hear you.
Sir, in case you are mute, can you unmute?
No, sir, we are still not able to hear you. Do you want to try without the earphones, probably on the speaker? Not yet, sir. So maybe you can check the volume settings in your system. Yeah, you are unmuted, but not able to hear you.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Finally.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Finally,
okay.
Sir. good to hear you.
Yes,
see you too, sir.
Yes, so where I can see myself. I mean,
Sir. Sir.
End test. I've gone from. You can hear me?
Sir.
Achha, okay. Sir. Thank you. I can't hear. My screen has gone. I don't know how to see you or anyway. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I also learned so many things from the presentation which you made, particularly the movement of the swamp deer from Jilmil Tal to Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary. And yeah, and I would say that there is a connectivity between the Dudhwa swamp deer in Dudhwa and Kishanpur. Although they are not connected, in between there are a large number of crop fields and river Sharda. But I would, it will be very interesting to study that connectivity also, and possibly between the Kishanpur Wildlife Sanctuary and Pilibhit Tiger Reserve. There is also there could be a movement of the swamp deer. So, and I'm sure that you must have also seen it in Katania Ghat Wildlife Sanctuary. Unfortunately, the connectivity between Dudhwa and Katania Ghat has been lost, but possibly in the night there some animals are moving. And you have rightly highlighted the importance of the grassland patches which are present in now in Hastinapur as well as in Jilmil. But there is also a very huge grassland patch in Katania Ghat. And I'm sure you must have seen it from the Ban. You can see for as far as the eyes can see, you can see the grassland. But so I think we have to use the drone to find out how many swamp deers are there in that patch of grassland. Do you have any comment on this, Vivash?
Yeah, sir. I mean, as I told, we figured out drones are very effective
Yes,
because sir, no one knows better these swampy grasslands than you. Very difficult to go and look for animals.
Yes.
Once you get in, you only thing that will be in your mind is how to get out.
Yes, yes.
Forget about sighting animal and all.
Yes,
So
yes.
drones technology, I mean, the drone photography can be used, and nowadays very systematically, actually, we can lay the grids, run the drones and do a line transit, or we can do a block count using that. But sir, what I would like to discuss with you, sir, you have spent a lifetime roaming around in these tall grassland patches, both wet grassland in the Tarai as well as dry grassland in Deccan and in the Thar Desert. Everywhere, sir, whether it is converted to sugarcane fields in the Tarai or converted to plantations and other form of agriculture, they are the ones which are rapidly disappearing.
Yes,
and unless we have something like mega species like focus on swamp deer or birds like Great Indian Bustard or Lesser Florican, it becomes very difficult to protect these patches of grasslands.
Yes, yes. See the grassland, as you have already said in your presentation, the grassland patches in the Tarai used to be very vast, almost up to the semi-Tarai. What we call it is the Gangetic Plain is also a semi-Tarai. That's why there also the swamp deers are present. Even the swamp frankly used to be present in much more extensively than the what it is present now. So these grassland patches, I think, have to be highlighted by species like swamp deer and Bengal falcon. Otherwise, most of the time these patches are considered as blank. Actually, and in Dudhwa also they were considered as blank in the official records. Blank means is useless. And I remember that Arjan Singh, he has also written in his book that the Ghola grassland, there he found nearly 3,000 swamp deer, herd of 3,000 swamp deers in 60s. And Ghola grassland was not included in the Sonaripur Wildlife Sanctuary. Before Dudhwa National Park was established, there was a Sonaripur Wildlife Sanctuary of 150 square kilometer. And Ghola grassland, despite the fact that there were nearly 3,000 swamp deer at that time in early 60s, it was not included because it was considered as blank. There were no tree. So why should we include it? And the Ghola grassland is all now under agriculture. So all the swamp deer, and he tried to bring the swamp deer and chase the swamp deers toward the Hastinapur wildlife, not Hastinapur, I mean Sonaripur Wildlife Sanctuary at that time. So I think we have to have a paradigm shift in looking at all the habitats, not only the forest habitats, but grasslands, wetlands, drylands, all type of habitats. Unless we start giving attention to all biodiversity, we will be losing species like swamp deer or swamp francolin or Bengal falcon or another species like that, or particularly the grassland species. So I think we have to have a paradigm shift in our thinking, that we have to do biodiversity conservation, not tiger and elephant and rhino conservation. Like you see in Assam also, there are wonderful sanctuaries in the in the Brahmaputra floodplains. Like Dibru-Sakhwa is one of them. Laukhwa, Borachapuri is another. Orang, of course, is a small, but is quite well protected. But there are, I have done a survey of the grassland birds of the Brahmaputra, and we found good areas which can be, which should be protected, not can be protected, but should be protected. But no one is giving attention to those species, or the grasslands, because people still consider them as useless habitat or not fit to be included in the protected area. So I think with your leadership in BNHS, try to bring the changes in the thinking of the forest department. Actually, in one of my articles, I have written that is a radical change. The forest department should be known as the conservation and habitat management department, not the forest department. Forest department was established in 1877. So now, at that time, it was just exploitation of the forest. And present now, their main emphasis is on conservation of the forest as well as other habitats. So we have to bring our change in our thinking to bring the lesser known habitats and lesser known species into consideration. Another point is about the importance of the elephants and the large herbivores like elephants and wild buffalo and swamp deer and others. See, in Tarai also, all these species used to be present in quite large number. And you will be surprised to know that I think I sent you the paper that wild buffalo was killed in Badaयूं district, and one of the best wild buffaloes used to be present in Badaयूं. Now, if you talk with anyone, Badaयूं mein wild buffalo, they say, "Are you mad?" But they were in 300. So the importance of these grazers is also very important. Like wild buffalo will eat coarse grass. And all these grazers used to maintain the grasslands. At present, we find them only in Kaziranga. You still find in Kaziranga, you still find the natural ecosystem or almost natural ecosystem and natural grazing system. There we have the elephants, we have the wild buffaloes, we have the rhino, we have the swamp deer, although in small numbers, and we have the hawk deer and like that. So we have to bring back the natural grazing system in the Tarai also. So I think your next step should be to reintroduce the wild buffalo in at least in Dadua and some few other places. Yeah. Okay.
Coming on to the natural system, sir, one of the former MSc students of Wildlife Institute and who was a park manager in Nepal, Jhamak Bahadur Karki, under the supervision of Dr. Y.V. Jhala, he carried out a beautiful study on grazing lawns in Bardia National Park, where he actually showed how rhinos and elephants help in facilitating survival of swamp deer and hawk deer by creating these grazing lawns. So, because these are the animals which are coarse feeders.
Coarse feeders, yes.
Hindgut fermenters and coarse feeders, elephant and rhino. They feed on coarse grass. It is like cutting and managing the grassland. And then once it is cleared, animals like hawk deer and swamp deer come and graze on the new
grass.
sprouts.
Yes.
So that maintaining only Kaziranga, to some extent Manas, sir.
Yes.
Now we have rhinos, wild buffaloes, and elephants there. Otherwise, that system is completely interrupted, in rest part. Even some of the best protected areas in Tarai, like Chitwan, doesn't have swamp deer. It has good number of rhinos, but it doesn't have swamp deer.
Yes,
we tried to relocate some swamp deer from Suklaphanta, but they didn't survive. So swamp deer, again, the translocation of swamp deer also very tricky. For that matter, any deer species. It's pretty easy to translocate a tiger, pretty easy to translocate a large mammal like elephant, but it's very tricky to translocate sensitive animals, especially the ungulates, wild ungulates. So that's how, because of capture myopathy, sir, a lot of animals, translocated animals died. That's how I consider Madhya Pradesh Forest Department. They have set a gold standard.
Yes.
Translocating large number of cheetal, say from Pench to Noradei, translocating swamp deer from Kana to Satpura. So those kind of things. But primarily what we need in the Gangetic floodplain, sir, the focusing on the remaining leftover grasslands. And emphasizing on the, unfortunately, we are still carrying out plantation, even in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary on the periphery. And also there is a reason, there is a logic. The officials say if we do not plant trees, they will get encroached.
Yes, that is a common excuse. Okay. But then we should have, like in some parts of Gujarat, they used to have grassland divisions.
Sir.
In Dahod and other places, actually grassland divisions. So we have to create, but those grassland divisions were mainly for commercial purpose, but that is okay. But here we have to re-emphasize the importance of grasslands, and we don't have to plant trees because, as you know, that in such areas, the trees grow very fast. I mean, because the soil is very productive, and then they get protection. So the whole ecosystem is changed once the trees come up. You have seen it in Dudhwa and Kishanpur.
The luxuriant teak plantation in Dudhwa, Katrania Ghat are the best examples.
Yes. Yeah. I think we should also think of how to remove those things. But that is a different subject.
In fact, but it may be a different subject, sir, but the amount of teak that we have in our protected area, which are not required in those areas, if we manage to harvest them properly, sir, all our protected areas can be managed perpetually with that money.
Yes. I think we should start working on that as you as a director of BNHS, and I'll give all my support to you on this aspect, because we have been discussing. I have discussed this issue of the removal of the teak with I think 6 or 7 chief wildlife wardens, and all say yes, it should be done, but they're all afraid if they started, then someone will come up and say that we will go to PIL. I said this removal is not for commercial purpose; it is to restore the habitat which was present earlier. And these teaks, some of these teaks were planted by the British or early in the 50s or 60s. Now they are 60 or 70 years old, and they are the best. They are in the best age for harvesting. And this harvested money, whatever you sell it should go in the Dudhwa Foundation, or it should not be commercially exploited in that sense, but the money should go for conservation. It's not for this. So I think we have to work on this issue and try to have some sort of a dialogue with the forest department. Do you have anything to say on this?
No, absolutely. I agree, sir, because we have to come out of this mindset. I am sure, sir, within the forest department also, there are a lot of people are thinking, but I think if they are backed by good science, by the biologists, and if we manage to project things in a proper manner, integrate it in the management plan of the protected area, a lot of good things can happen. And I am sure, sir, there are many sensible forest managers who will be willing to buy this idea.
Yes.
So anyway, sir, coming back to my experience of working with elephants and swamp deer, when we started working in Rajaji, I monitored that population. 2003-4, sir, Gujars were relocated, and constantly we are working for 16-17 years, monitored that area. One thing I realized as wildlife biologists, sir, we are very serious about monitoring the recovery of wilderness. We are very serious about how wildlife populations are responding. But we are completely ignoring a very critical aspect of what is happening to the communities that are being relocated outside the forest, sir. Because that is some way or the other, sir, the social part of it, social part of the relocation or voluntary relocation program has got a far-reaching implications on wildlife habitat. It may not be. I will tell you, sir, like the entire Rajaji Tiger Reserve became a wonderful wildlife habitat.
Yes, yes.
Haridwar forest of Haridwar Forest Division got completely degraded because buffaloes were all pushed to that area. Grasslands along Ganga were completely denuded because buffaloes went and grazed in those areas. So if we do not monitor the social aspect of relocation, we won't be doing justice to the entire program.
Yes,
So
yeah.
we may be bothered about animals and all, but looking at the humans and their lifestyle, the way they are doing, or what you say, sir, the way their health, their education, their welfare is taken care of is also equally critical. And this is something with every voluntary relocation program, as wildlife biologists, we should emphasize on more social analysis, of social part of this relocation program.
Yes, that's why we have to involve the social scientists as well as the people who work with the human beings, the people who work for education and human welfare. So it is they have been. I have been to P3 where the Gujars were relocated, but I don't have much experience like you have it. So you are the best person to tell us. But I agree with you that we have to see what happens post relocation, how they are coping up, and particularly the generation which has been located. The first, what we call it, the first generation. But the second generation, when they are relocated and they get better education, better facilities, health facilities, better opportunities for job, then they won't go back. I am not seeing. I don't think you are the right person to tell us that. I'm not. The younger generation will not go back to the raising buffaloes in the forest.
Yeah.
But the older generation, they are used to that. They can't adjust to the new environment, so they find it much more difficult. The younger generation, but if we provide them the facilities which they deserve or they need, then I'm sure that they will adjust to the new way of life. Because I'm sure they will, particularly after education. Education of the girl child is extremely important to change the society. Without girls' education, I don't think we can change the society. No society can be changed. That is my view, and that is my. If I was not working for conservation, I would have been working for the girls' child education. That is still my wish.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And sir, I will give you a simple example because when Gujars were relocated from Rajaji and we started our monitoring, I had 7-8 assistants, the Gujar assistants, who actually worked with me and who are still working in the area for 17-18 years. They have been working with us. So I get insight from them, what happens in their society. So I was surprised. The first change that happened, the women in the relocated colony started taking contraceptive measures.
Yes.
It's not the men, the women actually, because no woman in the society wants to remain perpetually pregnant.
Yes,
which was happening, sir. A lot of children were produced.
Yes,
they themselves started taking contraceptive measures. So here I would say it's a little bit of intervention from Health and Family Welfare Department will make a big difference.
Yes,
because education was not taken care of in this thing. I would say a lot of fundamental elements crept in. These people who were very liberal people when they were living inside the forest, they fundamental ideas were promoted in their society. And it was also told taking contraception
is illegal,
yeah,
against the religion, like
against
that.
the religion. So those kind of things, sir, these things, sir, the ladies themselves want to take contraceptive measures, and here religion is coming and preventing them. So it's a lot of, so that's why, sir, educating them, working with them, and ensuring them good education is provided to the younger generation is a must, sir.
Yes.
Along with I would say, sir, NGOs working for conservation should focus on these aspects, because unless we look into the human aspect of wildlife conservation, we will fail to save our species in the long run.
And this is valid for all over the country, not all over the country, but all over the world.
Yeah,
I mean, we have to have a human angle for wildlife conservation, but at the same time, we have to improve the lot of the people who are living in the forest with their help. I mean, we can't force them to do it. What we think that is best for them. Let them come. Let them see, and I'm sure that they will. They are, and it has happened in many places. They themselves have come out, and they say that they want to change themselves and they want to have a better life. Instead of just living in the forest and not having the schools and the medical facilities. These two things, medical facilities, schooling, as well as the transport. These are the essential things which the government has to provide. NGOs can do up to a certain extent, but NGOs cannot build a road. NGOs cannot build large schools and colleges, and cannot give the opportunity for the young people who come out of these schools and colleges to provide them jobs, and we can provide them skills. NGOs can do to a certain extent, but it is also should be the part of the government. The NGOs should work with the government. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the elephant and the swamp deer? Both are so wonderful. I love elephants. I wish.
Yeah. Fortunately, sir, after Mr. Sanjay Kumar came to Saharanpur and the Bijnor and Hyderpur area was highlighted, swamp deers are doing much better, sir. Much better. Elephants also, sir, as I told, I will tell you, sir, why enriching elephant habitat is extremely critical for reducing human-wildlife conflict. I have worked in Rajaji, I have worked in Chhattisgarh, and I have dealt with a more or less similar elephant population. There are around 250 to 300 elephants in 40,000 square kilometer in northern Chhattisgarh.
Oh,
and there are around 300 to 350 elephant in 1,000 square kilometer area of Rajaji Tiger Reserve. Hardly one person dies in Rajaji. We lose hardly one human being to elephants. Whereas nearly 100 people get killed in Chhattisgarh. Okay, in a much larger area. So the difference between Rajaji and Chhattisgarh is Rajaji is a linear strip of forest, but whatever forest is there, it has been consolidated. The habitat is good. There is good grass in the understory. There is a nice shrub layer. There is nice food fodder species. Lot of palatable trees are there in that. No external pressure is there inside the forest. Whereas 20,000 square kilometer in Chhattisgarh, sir, there are trees everywhere, but no forest.
No forest, yes.
Okay. Everywhere, sir, the ground is overgrazed or barren because of constant collection of tendu leaf and mahua. They keep on burning the forest. So there is nothing for animals, nothing for elephants to eat inside the forest, or very little for them to eat inside the forest. So what they do, entire day, they take shelter inside the forest. Evening, irrespective, I specifically showed those picture of bulls coming out, crossing Ganga. Here, Rajaji, only bulls come out. There, sir, starting from calf to year-old elephant to female, subadult, juvenile, young, adult female, adult male, everyone is outside in the crop field. So that's the problem. And not only in Chhattisgarh, sir, it's a chronic problem in states like Orissa, Chhattisgarh, where mining has destroyed large swatches of elephant habitat, where invasive species has taken over our natural wilderness areas. These are the problems, sir. If we do not manage our habitat, so that's why I always say, sir, it is not mapping the forest cover of the country. It is mapping the quality of forest.
Quality of, yes.
Which is much more important.
Yes, yes.
Everything that looks green is not necessarily palatable.
Yes, I totally agree with you because as I said, Rajaji and other area, Tarai, it is very rich. It's nutritious grass, so they don't have to go out. But in other places in central India, they have to go out and they need much bigger. And they also must be having a bad experience from human beings.
Yeah.
Because elephants are extremely intelligent animals. And even the poaching activities, there are many papers from Africa that particularly Uganda and countries where poaching had taken place in 70s and 80s, elephants still have that horrible experience. And there are a lot of interactions with the human beings. I don't call it as a conflict, human-wildlife conflict. I call it as a human-wildlife interaction because elephants don't have conflict with us. We have conflict with elephants.
Yes. Yeah.
They don't know what is conflict because we are culprits. We build crop fields in their migratory path, and they don't know they are not supposed to eat sugarcane field of a farmer. For them, it is a palatable grass.
Yes. Yeah. They are the best taxonomists, sir. They know sugarcane is a grass.
Yes,
they know bamboo is a grass.
Yes.
And a grass is a grass.
Grass is a grass. Whether it is a paddy field or a natural grass. Okay. Okay.
It was wonderful talking to you, sir. And I look forward to meeting you in Bombay.
Yes,
another week or so.
Just before we finish, I would like to say that I have been going to Dudhwa from 1983-82 onwards. And in the beginning, for a decade, we didn't see any elephant. Or we used to hear that a few elephants come from Nepal and then they go away, and I had not seen. But in I think 94, one of my students who was working there, he said, he phoned me that time there were no mobile, but I think when he came, he said there were 9 elephants. I said, 9 elephants in Dudhwa? And he said that they stayed for a few days or a few weeks. Now there is a permanent elephant population of nearly 100 elephants in Dudhwa National Park. And this is mainly possibly because of either they found Dudhwa very conducive for as a habitat, or possibly because the Nepal habitat has been destroyed. So now in Dudhwa, they have almost become permanent. Elephants have become permanent. And same thing is in Katania Ghat. In the 80s, we didn't have elephants in Katania Ghat, or they used to be just passing elephants. But now elephants are permanent in Katania Ghat also. I think is a good development. We should welcome them. Yeah. Sure. They are back and to their home. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Thank you.
With that, I would like to hand over the floor to the host.
Yes.
And to come to a conclusion of this evening's discussion. Okay. Over to you, Akshay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful discussion. Now I open the floor for question and answers, which will be moderated by Sanjay. Sanjay, please take over. Sanjay, are you there? Okay, I think there is some problem with Sanjay's network. So I request any participant, if they have any questions, kindly write it in the chat box. And before Sanjay comes, sir, I have a question. While you were showing the movement of swamp deer from JJCS to Hastinapur, I just wanted to know that there were a lot of fragments of grasslands. So is there any impediment in the movement? Does something else come in the way which stops or which makes it difficult for the swamp deer to travel 28 to 18 kilometers, such a long distance?
Yeah, especially the mining, boulder and sand mining is a problem. Illegal mining, legally they are not allowed. Illegal mining is an issue. And also in these areas, mining of riverbed materials, what we call RBM, is in great demand. So while giving lease of any area for mining or for removal of river-based materials, you have to keep this in mind that animals are moving. Other than that, there are no issues.
In the event?
Yes, Sanjay. Yes.
And most of the animals move during the night,
yes.
So there is hardly any activity. The major problem is mining. So mining issue need to be addressed.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sanjay, over to you.
Yes. I'm so sorry for that. I think this event has been really eventful with little bit of technical glitches. So I apologize for that. I just going back, I was thanking both of you. It was a really privilege to hear a former director of PNHS as well as the present director of the PNHS. And to specifically to Dr. Vivash, I don't think so. You appear to be distracted for even a second after you started your presentation because of the side-by dinner preparations. So hope you'll have a good dinner after the event. So and you enjoyed the food too, I guess. So coming back to the event, we had a really wonderful, insightful discussions. And there's one question, a technical question related to the findings that you had in your survey, Dr. Vivash, about I would say the movement of the deer. So currently, when we see that grassland and there is an issue with the habitat development, do you see in the future there would be some impediment with respect to the genetic transfer when it comes to the deer movement from one area of the forest to another area of the forest? Specifically talking about the areas that you highlighted in your presentation.
I think with better information available now, and very fine scale information available with us, I would say there will be better conservation planning. I am saying this because I am an eternal optimist. So I would expect things to improve from here rather than deteriorating. And I firmly believe if you have better knowledge, better information and published information, they will never go waste. They will never go waste, and they can be utilized in various way. Judiciously planning protected area, movement of animals, those things. If we do not judiciously plan, then judiciary can intervene to make us judiciously plan things.
Well said. Well said. Any other question?
The question is, it seems to be patchy. Can it be expanded to more areas? See, rivers are very dynamic. Erosion happens some year during the flood. Accretion takes place some year. I think because of that dynamic nature of the river, swamp deer is still managing to hold on. Otherwise, I don't see any other reason, despite such huge pressure, human pressure, how swamp deer is surviving. I think the course of the river is keeping some amount of wilderness still intact, and that is the biggest hope for swamp deer to survive in these areas.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So I would like to ask another question, which is directly, hello.
Yes, Sanjay, we
can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Sanjay, maybe you can try switching off your video because.
Yes, is it all right now, Akshay?
There's a lag. Maybe you can try switching off your video, then your audio would be working fine.
Okay, wonderful. I'll do that. Thank you so much for that. Yes, so I will repeat the question again so that we don't miss it out. So, going back to the events topic, where you both come across conservation and we see the need for having a conversation.
Sanjay, we're not. I think there is a lot of
consideration of.
There's a lot of break in your voice. Is everyone else facing the same thing? Or?
Yeah, Sanjay, your voice is breaking.
Switch between the networks. Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry for that. Am I audible now?
Yes, Sanjay. Yeah, now it's better.
Hello, is it still disconnected? Okay, wonderful. So I'll repeat myself. Considering the elephant conservation and the elephant conservation planning, which has been there in place for the last few decades, and now we see there is a need for conservation planning for even the swamp deers before it is too late, might be. So when we look at the elephant conservation planning as a species, and it is a keystone species, is there a consideration of other species also when there is a planning in place by government and other stakeholders, like many NGOs who are active in various landscapes? So is there consideration of other species also when there is a conservation focus being on keystone species?
Dr. Rahmani, would you like to take the question?
I think you should reply because
okay. Okay. See, the thing is, the beauty of saving animals like tiger and elephant is you can't save them in small protected areas. We need to declare large stretches of habitats to save them. For one simple example, I'll give you. There was one tusker called Tipu in Rajaji. So Tipu was radio collared by a colleague of mine, Christy Williams, between 1996 and 99. And when 4 years, Christy, when he followed Tipu, his home range was roughly around 400 to 500 square kilometer. In a season, he was observing Tipu moving over an area of 150 to 200 square kilometer. Over 4 years, he saw 500 square kilometer. So in his report, he mentions, final report, he mentions that we need 500 square kilometer of area to have one tusker like Tipu. Then you won't believe that was in 99 he finished his work. 2003 is the year, 3-4 is the year I started my work in Rajaji. And when Christy was following Tipu, Tipu was always on the western part of Rajaji. It never crossed river Ganga and came to the eastern part. And in 2004, suddenly I see Tipu in the eastern part of the park. Okay. So even 4 years of research was not enough to find out the home range of one single elephant. So what I found out, other than the 570 square kilometer of Western Rajaji, he is moving all over 250 square kilometer of Eastern Rajaji. That means entire 820 square kilometer of park is used by one tusker throughout its life. Just imagine we are talking about 300 animals in that area. How little we know about these animals. So if we want to save animals like elephants and tigers, we need to protect large stretches of forest as their habitats. And that's what actually we are doing. When we started in 1970s, we are focusing on small protected areas. Over the years, our focus has moved from small protected area level conservation to landscape level conservation. We are now talking about connected habitats. We are now talking about ensuring that corridors are intact. We are now talking about large tracts of forest, managed forest, protected forest, different category of forest, including some of the plantations or what you say, orchards, as part of protected area. If you look at the central India, the way tigers are moving from one protected area, say Tadoba, to other areas, they're moving for more than 1,000 kilometer. Tiger is moving in that area. And from starting from Maharashtra, they're landing up in Telangana. So we need to understand that. So when we are protecting these animals, indirectly, we are ending up in protecting large tract of habitats. Yes. Apart from that, there are some animals which actually need specialized habitats. Okay. For example, Great Indian Bustard, or for example, Lesser Florican or Bengal Florican. You need to provide them specific grassland habitats. And if those grassland habitats are gone while protecting large tracts of areas, so those species will be gone forever. And that's what we are facing in case of Great Indian Bustard, in case of Lesser Florican. We are facing the same problem right now. So I would say both the approach have their merits. There is absolutely no harm in protecting a flagship species like tiger and elephant. They do a lot of service, not only for other animals, but also maintaining the water security for our agriculture fields. They are absolutely critical. Having said that, we must understand the specific need of certain specialized species or species that survive in specialized habitat and protect those kind of areas. In short, we must understand our wildlife properly. We must understand our wilderness and wild habitats properly before protecting them.
Can I add, Bhavat, can I add what you have said?
Yes, please, sir.
Yes. See, in Jaldapara Wildlife Sanctuary, I have seen Bengal falcon, and there used to be black-breasted parrotbill and many other grassland species. But in Jaldapara, the main emphasis was on the rhino. And particularly after the decline of the rhino due to poaching, the forest department became very active, and rightly so, and I must appreciate their work. And now there are more than 200 rhinoceros. But in protecting the rhino and the rhino habitat, they forgot all other species. As a result of which, Bengal falcon has gone locally extinct from Jaldapara. I've seen the 3 males there displaying males. Black-breasted, there is no record of the black-breasted parrotbill. There is no record of other grassland obligate species. So you are right that these flagship species protect the habitat, but they don't protect the habitat of all the species. So we have to start thinking of protecting not the habitat, but the whole ecosystem. Jaldapara used to have wonderful grasslands, tall grassland, but they were burnt at the wrong time, particularly when these grassland species are breeding. Despite all our recommendations, they will burn it in end of March or April, which is the breeding time of the black-breasted parrotbill and the Bengal falcon. So they have been able to achieve the result of improving the rhino and the number, but at the same time, they have lost 2 or 3 critical species which were present earlier there. Thank you.
Yes, so that's very wonderful. And if I would, I'm actually tempted to conclude it that, and very nicely put by Dr. Bhivash as well as Dr. Rahmani, that we are transitioning ourselves, from a single species to considering the multiple species to the entire landscape, and then now we are looking at world as an ecosystem. So I think that's home from this event. Just to have another question, and it's coming from the herbivores, and we talked about it. So how does the interaction between a large herbivore and a small herbivore would affect the conservation planning? And is this also considered by conservationists and the planners and the implementing stakeholders? Because there's one very interesting line that Dr. Bhivash talked about, and he showed in distribution that where the elephant distribution ends, the swamp deer distribution starts in one of the maps that he showed. So how do we consider the interaction between large herbivores and small herbivores in terms of foraging, in terms of distribution?
Vivash?
Yeah.
Are you replying or?
No, you go ahead, sir.
See, they ignore each other. The question is the large herbivores, they tolerate each other, not ignore each other, but tolerate each other because they were part of the ecosystem earlier. And what we are seeing is that is devastated, most of the devastated ecosystems because many of the species are already gone. So the elephant will not bother about much about the rhino. Of course, they have got some. Regarding the rhino, they fight with each other, but regarding swamp deer and others, they won't bother. Actually, if we have all the herbivores, it creates a good habitat for every species. So I don't think. And regarding the distribution, where the distribution of the swamp deer ends and the elephants end and the swamp deer starts, as I said, in Kishanpur and Dudhwa and Katania Ghat, both the species are present in the same area.
Kaziranga, sir.
Kaziranga is a classical example. Manas is a classical example. So it is not very clear-cut distribution. What we are seeing at present is a truncated distribution. Elephants used to be present. If you see the records of the Mughals, and they have the very good hunting records. Elephants were distributed in Awadh region. Awadh is the Lucknow region. They were present up to Lucknow or surrounding areas. So wild elephants and like that, elephants as well as wild buffaloes and swamp deer. So they will. We have to leave nature, and they will be very happy without us. That is my conclusion.
I would like to share a few things from my observation. See, if you remove elephants from the forest, it will greatly affect survival of other ungulates.
Yes.
In the sense, elephants have three kinds of feeding behavior. One is they debark, they remove the bark of the tree. The other is they break the crown of the tree and feed on the crown. And third, the kind of feeding habit, which is very, very critical, is pushing down the tree. They push down the tree and they don't kill the tree. They push down the tree. So the above ground biomass, which is there on the tree, which is not available for other ungulates to feed, is made available by elephants through this habit.
Yes.
So animals like elephants, rhinos, and all these mega herbivores or wild buffaloes, they are known as great facilitators in the forest. So if you remove these animals, then things are going to be affected. The other thing, see, British came to India and started teaching us silviculture. Okay, so the entire art of silviculture is say 150-year-old or 200 years old. But what happened? What happened to our forest before that? Elephants were actually the true silviculturists in our forest. So when the forest density goes up, then it affects regeneration. And that's when elephants, by pushing down the trees, open the canopy, allows light to penetrate, facilitate regeneration. Okay, so this is how things are very, very intricately related. And these elephants do not harm other ungulates, rather it facilitates survival of many other
species. Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely, I agree with Vivash. Sanjay, any other question?
No, sir, I think we are good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Those answers. Aksha, can you please take over?
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Rahmani and Dr. Pandav. It was really a wonderful session. Thank you all the participants for joining. And we had a wonderful insight to conservation about conservation for the swamp deer as well as the elephant. And as Dr. Pandav explained, that it's a facility, both the species facilitate each other. So with this, I'd like to conclude this event. Thank you so much. And this event will be it will be available as a YouTube video because it has been recorded, and the link will be shared with all of you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Have a good night. Yes.
Good night. Good night. Bye-bye.